Welcome back to the show. I am so pleased to have Mike Inman with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Kieran, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Really looking forward to that conversation today.
Yeah,
I'd love to kick it off with, I guess, a bit about your thinking on things. And you're obviously an expert negotiator. You've been doing this for a long time. You view negotiation as an opportunity rather than a conflict, which I think is quite different to how most people view it. Can you elaborate on this perspective and why you think it's important for successful negotiations?
yeah. Let me pick up on one word you used, which is getting a lot of debate in my community right now. My community being the negotiation community is the term expert, and it's very easy to title yourself expert, to see someone else's PowerPoint, to go to Harvard, take their material, and say, "Hey, I'm a negotiation expert. I know what I'm doing. Let me teach your teams." And here's my view on the topic: you're not an expert until someone else, by the way, who knows what a real expert is, refers to you as an expert. So I appreciate your comment there. And what do I think of as an expert? I tend to, my own cognitive bias is a person has to show a competency. Now we all know in coaching there's world class coaches that cannot play their sport, and there's world class athletes who cannot teach their sport. So even within the negotiation expert field, there are expert teachers and there are expert doers. And then my background's in engineering. I'm a numbers person, quantifiable results. So if someone has shown the ability to negotiate in multiple industries, buy side, sell side, if they've used the skill in multiple ways, multiple times, to the level where they're getting promoted, they're getting bigger jobs, more responsibility, that tends to tell me there's some level of expertise in there versus somebody who just talks about it and knows about it but can't actually display that. So sorry for going off on a tangent, but it's big in the community right now because it's so easy to just say I'm an expert, and the person has no ability to help someone else, much less negotiate for themselves. So the second part of your question, refresh my memory, was on the conflict
Yes, the difference
versus
between exactly seeing it as an
yeah.
opportunity rather than a conflict.
Yeah. So in the States, we have a saying, a lot of English speaking countries have the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you're building a house with just a hammer, that's a funny looking house. No matter how good you are with that hammer, your house is just not going to be something you want to live in. So what we see a lot of is people with a skill set in crisis or conflict negotiating. Now, don't hear something I'm not saying. That's the highest form of the craft. When you're negotiating over a human life, someone who's having a conflict between their ears, they're on a bridge. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, and your job is to talk them off that bridge to save that life. That's the highest calling. I don't want that job. I'm not emotionally equipped to do that job. Would I try? Absolutely, because I want to save a life. But I don't know that I would be very good at it. However, when you start to say, "Oh, it's a conflict. Let's negotiate it," or "It's a negotiation. Let's talk about conflict," I go, "Hold on a second. We've made an assumption here that's not necessarily correct." For example, in negotiations, sometimes one side, the buy side or the sell side, will have a challenge with the timing when a project starts. Now, you could make the argument that, well, it's a conflict. Well, it's a conflict of schedule, Mike. Don't you get that? I go, yeah, it's a conflict of schedule, but it's really a specification. And you say to the other side, hey, listen, we need to start earlier or delay the start. And the other side, assuming that it works for them, the request, can say, you know what, no problem. We can change the schedule. But it's a little bit hard for us. We didn't really want to do that. We didn't expect to do that. I'll tell you what, if we move the schedule, will you be a reference account for us? Will you pay us a change fee to change it? And now we're talking about how can both sides help the other side to make the deal bigger, to make the deal better. And it's not really a conflict, at least in my definition of it. So I think negotiations from a business to business perspective, we should we should have the expectation. We should enter into it thinking, I want to help you, Kieran. And if you're a worthy business partner, you're going to want to help me. So how do we put our assets together and make something beautiful out of it, make something better out of it.
Mm.
Now, again, don't hear something I'm not saying. There are people in my space who teach transparency and trust, and that's important. And you can have a better deal when you have transparency and trust. I'm not disagreeing with that. But there was no time in my sales or purchasing careers, no matter how high the level of trust, that somebody said, hey, here's everything that's going on. Don't use it against me. Right? You in a business negotiation, at least I consider it a fiduciary responsibility to please my boss, the board, the shareholders, and therefore I have to protect information. I can't allow the other side to have so much leverage and hope they won't use it against me that it puts us at a disadvantage. So even though I want to be trusting and trustworthy, I can't share everything about my sheet of paper in a negotiation because I need to use that to produce value for my side too. And certainly not to be taken advantage with the other side. Did that answer your question a little bit about the differences there?
Yeah, it did, definitely. Wanted to maybe expand on that a little bit in terms of something that I remember a manager and a coach that I was working with previously gave me some pretty sage advice around, when you're
Yeah.
walking into a negotiation, the worst thing you can do is not be prepared. So like
Oh.
anything, failing to prepare is preparing to fail, right? And so I guess coming into these meetings, negotiations, etc., having having I guess a few different potential outcomes that you're looking to achieve, and then also having foresight in terms of what the potential objections may be is
Right.
got to be a really good idea, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And especially, here's what I've seen because I teach buyers and sellers. And I was just getting our book. We have a book, and it says, if those who fail to plan are planning to fail. Um, Salespeople in general, and I don't like to stereotype, but there are certain trends we need to look for and respect, either cultural norms internationally or in professions. For example, salespeople, they tend to think of negotiations as I have to be flexible and entrepreneurial. I have to wait for the other side to make a move, and then I will react to that. And I will use my speaking skills and my relationship skills to, and they'll worry about planning later after the fact. Buyers tend to be, at least the better buyers tend to be more objective in business to business world. They try to have a plan and follow the plan that is put in place either by the project management on their side or the shareholders or the internal stakeholders. So buyer's going to have a plan. If a seller doesn't have a plan, they're at a disadvantage. Even something as simple as the agenda for a meeting, and even something as simple as both sides can agree on the agenda points. For example, when I'm coaching sellers and they want to get a price increase, but there's been a failure, there was a quality issue or a delivery, something like that. What I tell them is you put the failure first on the agenda. You solve the problem. You tell the client what you've done to prevent it from happening in the future and what you've done to make up for it happening in the past. You get them to shake their head and agree, yes, I am happy with what you've done. Then I want you to put two or three more things. I want you to separate the price increase you're going to talk about later from a space and time perspective. And then the last thing on the agenda, you're going to talk about the price increase. When I'm coaching buyers and there's a price increase and a failure, what I do is I say, you put the price increase first on the agenda. And you put followed immediately by the failure. And the meeting goes like this: request for price increase denied. How can I possibly give someone an increase when we've had this failure? So the plan that goes in, being intentional, absolutely has an impact on the outcome. So your boss
Mm.
is right. That whoever gave you that coaching, absolutely dead on.
Hmm. I wanted to dig into a point you mentioned there before, which I think is so valid in not just negotiation, but everything in life in terms of being proactive as opposed to reactive and waiting for things to potentially blow up. And, then you're in I guess, potentially a bit more of a conflict.
Mhm.
Maybe for the listeners that might be on the seller side, could you give us some practical examples in terms of how people can start to be more proactive with things like negotiation terms, things that are, a win-win outcome for both the buyer and the seller? Like, what are the things that people could potentially do? Should they be bringing these things up in the initial meeting and a discovery call? Where and when should people be starting to bring these items proactively into their conversations?
Yeah. I love that you asked that question. So first of all, from a planning perspective, planning should be, I'm going to use this word, institutionalized, especially on the sales side. Sales organizations usually have a portfolio of products that they're selling, SaaS. Now, within that, there's differences and there's levels and tiers and maintenance packages and things like that. But you're selling software as a service. Now, in that, there's going to be things that are commonly negotiated, terms and conditions, and there's going to be things that have value for your company that may be low value for the other side, low, easy for them to do, but high value to you, like an introduction. Hey, Kieran, listen, I'm on LinkedIn and I see that you're connected to whoever it may be that I'm interested in doing business with. Would you mind making an introduction for us? Right? So now, instead of hitting somebody with one of those spam emails, that in fact, my spam filter is, if you're not in my contact list, you go to spam first. I have to pull you over into my inbox to address it, because there's just so much junk out there. No matter how well crafted the sales email, it's going into my spam filter. So I think having a negotiation plan internally is a really successful thing for sellers to do. It might take a salesperson an hour to put together a list of things that they want and need from accounts, or things they're allowed to do for the customer that may have low value to the sales organization and high value to the customer, and to put together that list. Now, they may do it over lunch. You can do a lunch and learn. You could do a brainstorming session. You do it in Slack. There's any number of modes of communication and number of people who can be involved. But I will bet you, because the sales organization's portfolio is similar to every seller on the team, that when they come up with their list of things that they would like to ask for from the client and things they're allowed to give to the client, that list is going to be 95% identical salesperson to salesperson, and probably 95% identical opportunity to opportunity. And the 5% difference is, oh, I'm selling into HubSpot versus, oh, I'm selling into Sally's software company. There's big companies, little companies, but those are exceptions. So then when you have this list of things to negotiate, now that's your part of your planning process that you can do on your side. Spend the hour, 2 hours getting it together, and that will be useful time and time and time again. Make that initial upfront investment. Now, going into the negotiation, you don't really know when the buyer is going to start to negotiate. Sometimes they're doing it all along. The internal user community asks for, hey, can you add this feature? Yeah, we can do that. Okay, thank you. Hey, can you do this schedule? Yeah, we can do that. Thank you. So that's technically an opportunity to negotiate. But most salespeople, they're thinking they're there to please the customer. So they just give things away that could have value to the customer side. And that's a negotiation, or an opportunity to negotiate. And then once they get done pleasing the internal stakeholders, somebody there might throw it over the wall to purchasing. And then purchasing comes in and says, hey, listen, Kieran, we're going to need you to do better on quality and warranty, delivery. And you're going to say, well, Mike, I talked to the stakeholders and they said that they were happy. Yeah, they're happy, but we're not happy yet. So here's what we're going to need for you to do, Kieran. And now that's when the salesperson says, now we're negotiating because purchasing's involved. Sure, you are. So now you got to bring that plan in and say, hey, Mike, you the purchasing agent, we can move on pricing, but here's what we need from you in return. We need for you to be a reference account. We need for you to move the schedule back to something that's preferable to us. Maybe there's some efficiencies in travel, in movement. If you said, we had a client that wanted to save, they wanted to take $100,000 off the proposal. And we had priced in that they were a premium. They were a big brand logo. And the EVP of sales said, you have the order. I'm going to go to finance. And they came back and they said, I talked to finance. We're 100,000 off. What are we going to do? And we said, well, listen, let's talk about it. What can we do? And we said, hey, do you have any sales conferences, coming up in, 3 to 6 months, about the timing that we were going to do some training anyway? And they said, yeah, we do. Why? And we said, well, why don't we bolt on to the end of the conference that you already have? Because then those plane tickets that you're buying for all your salespeople can be amortized across not just the session that you're already paying for, but they can go in our session. We save them $150,000 in travel costs when they ask us to save them $100,000 in proposal cost. They're super happy. We're super happy, right? But both sides have to be willing to look at things a little bit differently than just saying you need to do better on price. That was something else we should talk about, is the discounting discussion that I see prevalent in online forums, because there's two schools of thought there, and I'd like to know which one you're in. One school of thought says if you sell well enough, if you sell the value, you don't have to discount. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. I don't think that's the reality, though. It's going to differ from customer to customer. Every business has different circumstances, different needs. They're in a different part of their maturity model. So, as much as you can be the best seller in the world, deliver the most value, make the most compelling use case and business case around why they need this solution, there's always going to be people that are going to ask for a discount. And it's
Yeah.
just around how you manage that ask in terms of giving certain things. It's that give and that get, right? It's like, what can you give them
Yeah.
to make them feel like, a lot of it is this psychological thing was like, I feel like I just want to win. I want something here. But what are those gives that you can give someone back in return that don't necessarily need to be discounting? There's other ways you can do things, right?
Yeah. I 100% agree with what you said. I would just add to a couple things. First of all, I do agree if you've sold well enough, you don't have to discount. But the word have to really kind of bothers me, because I see negotiation as something we get to do. So I think we've missed an opportunity to negotiate, to, dare I say, build a better relationship when we sell so well that they just say yes. So that's the first thing we've missed out on. The second thing is there's a thing we call the power of no. So I'll try to tell a brief version of this story. I was negotiating a big print deal, global $100 million deal for IAC, one of the companies I worked for. And we had 10 business leads there. I was the lead negotiator, and R.R. Donnelly brought in 10 print experts. Their president, Bob Nelson, was in the room, and Bob is trying passionately, persuasively to convince us to give them the business. Now, what he didn't know was we'd already decided they were getting the business. They were actually the only supplier in the world that could fulfill our scope of work. So Bob says, and not only are we great today, we're going to be great in the future because we've rolled out a Six Sigma initiative. Now, I'm Six Sigma trained, certified, and I know that when there's a Six Sigma initiative, there's usually a cost savings attached. So this is how fast the negotiation went. I said, Bob, when I hear you say Six Sigma, I'm assuming there's a cost savings attached to that? And he said, yes, there is. And I said, is it 6%? And he said, as a matter of fact, 6% is our target. And I said, I want half of that back every year in a rebate. And Bob said, done. You got it, Mike. Yes. Now, my boss was ecstatic because that's $3 million coming back to us every year that took 15 seconds to negotiate. The problem is he said yes too fast. I would have felt better had Bob said, Mike, do you realize that at this late stage of a negotiation, you just asked me for $3 million? And I would have said, uh-huh. And he would have said, listen, there's nowhere near $3 million baked in our numbers. Out of respect for your position, I will call our CEO. And I would have said, there's a conference room across the hall. Go call the CEO. And he would have gone across and 15 minutes later come back in and said, the CEO is in France and I need until tomorrow morning. And I would have said, for $3 million, you can have until tomorrow morning. And he would have said, Mike, buddy, just give it a rest. And in the morning, we would have met at Starbucks because we're from the States and that's what we do. And he would have said, listen, as expected, there's nowhere near $3 million. We can offer you $500,000 if we stop negotiating now and start to integrate our teams. And I would have said, $500,000. How about $1 million? And we would have settled around $750,000. And I would tell the story about how I went all the way to the CEO to get $750,000. And instead, I tell the story about how we got $3 million in 15 seconds. I'm unsatisfied. Now, you can call me greedy if you want, but he was in such a rush to say yes and make me happy that it actually made me think, was 6% really 8%? and was 50-50, really 60-40, could I have delivered 4.8 million to my boss, my company, my shareholders? So I think when we close a deal, we've missed an opportunity to ask for a little more. And when the customer says, "You're out of your mind, you got to do better," okay, let me check with my boss, the CEO, the manager. But when I do that, they're going to ask for something in return. They're going to ask for a longer term deal. Can we take this deal from 3 years to 4 years, or 3 years to 5 years? And the customer says 5 years. Nobody gets 5 years. How about 4? Great. I'm going to go back to the manager, see if I can get you a discount, and we just added an extra year on the deal. And now both sides can actually feel like they're doing their job. They're asking, they're trying, and what we call raise the bar. The other side should say no, and then we can exchange value that maybe has value for both sides. So did that story resonate with the discounting as a tool, or sell well enough you don't have to discount?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Okay,
I
you
guess
got it.
shifting gears a little bit, Mike, I'd love to talk a bit about Tableforce, the company you're with at the moment. Been around
Yeah.
since 1997, and you've successfully navigated a bunch of ups and downs. Through booms and bust cycles, as well as the transition through that thing that people might know of COVID. What was that reinvention process like, and what were the
All right.
key challenges that you faced?
It was scary. Let me tell you, in March of 2020, we were 70% booked for the year, for the rest of 2020. We had dates further out. Well, we usually schedule 3 months plus out, and then COVID hit. And by the end of March, we went from 70% booked to zero overnight. I mean, the world lost its mind. And for years, about one or two clients a year would say, "Hey, do you have any videos, or can we do this conference? Can we call people in and do it on Skype?" And we're like, "No, you're going to be in the room. That's the best training possible. That's highest quality." In learning and development world, you want to learn better and retain it longer. Those two things to have an impact. No, nothing in video. And when COVID happened, no travel for the foreseeable future. So we had one client who said in their best accent, "I know damn well my people have 10 minutes between meetings. I want 10-minute videos." So we said, "Okay, we're gonna do the best 10-minute videos that we can." And and then we researched what other people were doing. I found one trainer had a PowerPoint presentation. We don't use any PowerPoint. And they didn't have their video on. They had the PowerPoint on the screen, and they talked and they read every word. And I'm like, "Well, we are not gonna do that. That sucks. What are we going to do?" So we looked at different people's videos and tried to get different backgrounds. And we asked marketing people, "What do you think about these different backgrounds, and what works and what doesn't, and learning development? And how do we make for the best thing possible?" So we said, "Well, we're getting 4K cameras. I'm coming at you right now for my 4K camera." And then we found that things like Zoom knock everything down to 480. It doesn't matter how good the quality is once you're above the quality of your tool, your mode of communication. So we had to get into the technical details of how do we take our content from the real world, put it into video in the best way possible, and then get that video out to our clients in the highest quality possible. And we had to learn about technology. We had to. I'm our head of IT, for lack of a better word, because Bill, my partner, does not like technology, and I do. So I just put that hat on and said, "Roll up the sleeves. I'm going to learn how to do this." And he challenges me, and he says, "Why are we doing it that way?" And I have to re-explain what I learned and what I Googled. And luckily, I'm a lifelong learner. I enjoy the learning process. So in my downtime, I learned to run the IT department. And when I say downtime, in the old world, I'd leave for London on Saturday, get there Sunday, teach Monday, Tuesday, come home Wednesday. I'd try to book 2 sessions, but that could be a session. 5 days to teach 2. Now, I just did a session. I had New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, China, India, and London. I woke up at 1 o'clock my time, did around the world. 3 hours, went back to bed. I had some coffee. But We can either complain about it, and there were days that I complained, and there's days that I miss my old life because I love to travel. I love to meet new people. Sydney's one of my favorite cities on the planet. But I'm not going to, let it impact my life. I want to have a good life, and we're going to do it the best way possible. So we use technology to do that. And then the clients who want to do in person, we can do in person for them as well.
Mm,
Does that answer your question about kind of reforming? And yeah, it was scary. It was like, how is the world going to shut down?
yeah.
How long?
I think
Is the
we're
world
probably
going to,
all thinking
is
that, right?
banking system going to collapse?
Yeah.
How did the airline industry stay in business? Much less, how do all these cruise ship industries stay in business? How does anybody, you can't ship parts from China to the United States. You can't get them. Doesn't matter
Mm,
what price they were not available. So luckily, there was a lot of renegotiating that had to be done, and clients were calling us saying we want to renegotiate, but we realize we have limited leverage because they have the supply, and therefore we have to be nice to them while we're trying to get the supply. And it was a race. When you have one supplier in China and they have 3 customers in the United States, that one customer that gets that first shipment gets first market mover advantage. So, you have to have a relationship. Hopefully, you've negotiated good enough deals where you have a relationship because of the way you negotiated.
mm. And with all of this, Mike, obviously it sounds like through this, through these turbulent times and over the course of the business that you've been in a position where you've had a very healthy pipeline. And that's not something that every business has. And one thing that I've found fascinating before we had this conversation today was you mentioned that the business has never done any marketing. And I see that from time to time. It does happen. But I guess I'd love to hear a bit more around that. I mean, how do you think you've managed to build such a solid pipeline and have such loyal customers without doing any marketing at all? I mean,
Yeah.
can you talk us through how that's been achieved over the years?
Yeah, so Bill, our founder, started the company in 1997. So he's in his 28th year, and I'm in my 14th year with Bill. And by the way, I'm a former client. I brought Bill and Tableforce in over the years to teach my purchasing teams to negotiate better deals. So I was familiar with the product. I brought him in repetitively, like most of our clients do, and then I jumped and I came to Tableforce. And one thing that is front and center is the intense focus on negotiation training. We own the domain negotiationtraining.com, and why that's important to us is we have customers over the years who say to us about once a year, someone will say, "Hey, that was great training. Will you teach us CRM?" And we say no. And they go, "No, we'll pay you." And I say, "Of course you would." But no, we don't do CRM. We don't do relationship management. We don't do conflict. In my LinkedIn headline, it says, "I am not a crisis negotiator." If you have interpersonal relationship issues, of which I've dealt with many times over the years, which I've had training over the years on how to deal with, not always successfully, no, I'm not going to train your teams how to do that. We have an intense focus on B2B negotiating. So quality and laser focus on what you do well, know what you don't do well, and be willing to say no to customers. You will earn. I feel as a customer, when a supplier told me no, I always felt like, ooh, I can trust this seller, because most sellers say yes to everything, and it's the sellers who dare to say no, we're not going to do that. That I go, tell me more. Oh, you dared to say no to me? You've earned a little bit of credibility because it's scary to say no to a customer, especially a big customer. So that's a good thing. That helped us. And then one of the things I loved about Tableforce is there's an immediate impact on the business that's favorable to you, your company, and the relationships that you've built. So somebody takes our class, they go back, they see the salesperson gets better deals, the sales management, the whole team does better. So they bring us back in, and repetitively. Then someone will get promoted because they've done so well, better than their peer group. And they'll bring us in to teach their new team, or they'll leave companies, go somewhere new, and bring us there. So you mentioned that word pipeline. Our pipeline is unbelievably strong. I haven't booked anything in 2025 yet. Here we are in June, but I've just did a customer mid-May who said we have a sales conference 2025 Q1. I don't have the dates yet. So I've already got people talking about 6 months out from now. Building that pipeline allows sellers to not market as much, not spend the money on marketing, because the marketing really comes from the quality and the word of mouth of people who've used your product. Now, you could make the argument that, hey, you're missing an opportunity here, Mike. If you took a pile of money and did some marketing, you could scale your business, grow your business. Absolutely, we could. But then our margins would erode. There's some risk there. We'd have to take on additional new trainers, which isn't a bad problem. We can solve that, but there's always a risk of quality. So for right now, pipeline is really important to manage that, to have it. And then when a customer says, "I just had this," they said, "We need a discount," and I said, "No problem. I can work with your budget." And they had a date that I said, "I will get you the discount if you will take this date." I happen to be on the East Coast of the United States already, so it was going to be convenient for me. I wouldn't have to travel 2 days to get there and back. And then they started putting some really, really difficult terms and conditions in place. And I'm like, "I've already met your budget and you've met my schedule, but you're dictating all sorts of terms and conditions that I don't think is a good fit for us. So let me introduce you to somebody else." And I tried to get them to take another trainer because Tableforce doesn't need to take bad clients. We we have really good clients that are booked a long way out. So when we say no to somebody, did I leave money on the table? I did. Would it have been a good payday? Sure. But life quality, business, happiness has a high value. So to be able to say no because you've got a long pipeline is a good, healthy thing. So that's kind of the position that we've groomed. It took a long time. What I think the stat is it 60 something percent of businesses are out of business after 3 years? Starting a business is hard. Bill tells me stories when he started about pounding the phones. I'm doing this because back in our day we had telephones. It wasn't like this. We didn't have auto dialers and stuff like that. And just calling people over and over and over and talking to the secretary and trying to get to the manager. It was hard to build the business. But once it got built, then the growth came from following what our process is, quality, and people wanting to do business with us.
I love the two of those points you mentioned there. I think are so relevant in terms of knowing when to say no, because there's a lot of customers that you probably never want to do business with. Maybe they just don't appreciate the offering. They're just not a good fit. That's going to be detrimental to the relationship, and it's probably not going to last. There's also the opportunity cost of spending time with that person or that business where you could be spending time elsewhere. And then the other piece you mentioned about referrals and word of mouth and how that impacts margins, because the less you spend to acquire a customer, the healthier your margins are. So, it's a
Yeah.
win in the long term because more profit goes back into the business.
So, Karen, let's talk about the sales function. And most of the people, most of the time, they have hunters and they have farmers. The hunters are out there trying to get the new logos, the new business,
Mhm.
and the ops team, internal sales, account management, is trying to grow the accounts. Is that general statement true of your perception of sales?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
Okay. So then what I perceive happening is the hunters of the world, the salespeople, don't really have to deal with the bad customers because they get paid on that closing of the deal, and the revenue that's supposed to be there may not always be there, and the margins that may not always be there either. So they get their commission check, their bonus, and then they throw it over the wall to the ops team who now has to deliver. So if it's a bad account, and that can be bad technically, it's just not a good fit. You'd have to change your product or service too much to please the customer, and we have some of those. Or it could be a bad fit culturally. They're just not a person you can get along with. But the salesperson, the hunter, doesn't have to deal with that. That's the ops team. So you have these compensation models that incent hunters to hunt bad accounts because they're personally incented to do that. Do you find that in a lot of the people you work with?
Yeah, to a certain extent, definitely see it with larger companies that are very focused on, hyper growth in terms of acquiring and saturating as much market share as possible. But the point that you addressed there, I think, is extremely relevant and something that this whole issue could be addressed and resolved by having the right kind of compensation model in place, because you dangle a carrot where you want the rabbit to go. If you had the right kind of compensation where you were rewarding things like customers seeing results and achieving the objectives they set out to achieve within a certain time frame. Imagine that. Paying someone, a salesperson, based on the customer seeing success. That's the reason why you've got so many referrals and so much good word of mouth, is because you're delivering results for customers. So that's one thing you could do. You could also look at paying people based off revenue retention or other types of metrics that are important to the business around how long we actually retain this customer for. These kind of things will incentivize the right behaviors, because if you have
Yeah.
the wrong compensation plan in place, then you're going to drive the wrong behaviors.
I couldn't agree more. And in one of my jobs, I had operations, and that included the internal sales support team. And the compensation model was set up that the sellers got paid twice. Once on the close, the initial close, and they weren't compensated on the renewal. They were compensated if they saved an account that left. So imagine this. The frontline seller, and they were like boots on the street. They were all over the United States and Canada. If the account failed and they went back and resold it, then they could get their second bit of compensation. So what they were doing, the salespeople, is they were closing the account, and then they wouldn't call. They would just stay out of the way. They wouldn't answer phone calls, emails, nothing. The end customer would get upset, say, "We're canceling," and then they'd go back in and they would save the day and they'd get their double compensation. And I'm like, "You're out of your mind. You can't do this." To our CEO, who is a salesperson, who should know these things. But compensation drives behavior. So you really got to have a good comp plan. But that means the ops team, they need to be compensated too, based on that renewal and keeping that account happy and growing. Whose responsibility is it to grow the account? It should be everyone's. And if the account does grow, who gets the credit?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the lowly project manager who comes to work every day and just moves emails around, make sure people get things done? Or is it the manager who's, I don't know what the answer is. I just know it's a very strategic thing, your comp model, to make sure that all your people are aligned with your customer as well. Like we don't have an internal sales team and a sales team. When somebody comes in the door and says, "Hey, we want you to do our negotiation training," whoever has taken it owns it through delivery. Like there's no handoffs. And that's little stuff. That's like making binders. Right here. I make sure I see them. And there's ways to outsource binder manufacturing. I know them. I've reviewed them. But when I get on a plane and I show up and class starts at 8 a.m. Monday morning, I got to know that it's right, because we don't have a PowerPoint. I've got no backup. So that book, that material, everything has to be perfect every single time. Otherwise, I'm going to lose sleep at night. So I do jobs that are not classically negotiator jobs, not classically IT jobs, not classically sales jobs. It's an operations job, but I'm in front of the client. My job is to make sure they have a great experience. So therefore, I own it.
Right. And that's the big difference there, is you have full responsibility, accountability, and ownership of that customer through that whole cycle. And that's where a lot of businesses have issues, is lack of alignment between different departments, lack of metrics in terms of what's important for the customer and important for the business. And so people can kind of handball things over, throw it over to the customer success team or, account or a delivery team and go, not my problem anymore. And so
Yeah.
you having that relationship with that customer all the way through means that you're really invested in seeing them through and seeing them deliver results, because it's your name that's attached to them, your reputation, and you want to make sure you do the right thing by the customer.
They are going to see me. We're a one-person show. Whichever trainer shows up, that's what you get. So if there's anything wrong, they're looking at me going, "Man, that Mike guy, he screwed something up." So yeah, and it's little stuff. It's one time I had a printer that when we do role plays, we have yellow sheets of paper, blue sheets of paper, and if you're a buyer, you get a blue sheet of paper. Blue buyer. And if you're a seller, you get a yellow sheet of paper because yellow is gold and sellers make all the money. And they printed the wrong stuff on the wrong sheet of paper. I handed it out, and I realized as they were planning, oh my gosh, I've got sellers with buyers information. This is gonna, I can't allow this to happen. So now at the bottom of our sheet of paper, right, it says yellow, so that when I flip through all the papers, I can see that the seller got the yellow sheet of paper, yellow on yellow. It's continuous improvement. No one is ever perfect, and I'm not perfect, but it really hurts me when I make the same mistake twice. So when I find a mistake, I go through and I make sure it never happens again. But that's account ownership, right? Yeah. It's your name, your brand in front of the client.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can excuse ourselves for making a mistake once, but if it's twice and repetitive, then that's an issue. And I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I guess just switching gears a little bit, reflecting back on your journey, obviously you've gone through a lot, like all of us, to get to where you are today. There's been all those ups and downs. I guess reflecting back on that journey, I mean, what are you most proud of, and what lessons have you learned that you wish you knew earlier?
I'll tell you what I'd say is my most proud accomplishment in business. Through my career in Fortune 500 companies, I was able to survive 15 rounds of layoffs in 15 years. At America West, we had 6 layoffs in 9 months. It was brutal. It was 9/11. Like the company was barely staying afloat. Late in my management career at MGM Resorts, I had 0 turnover in 4.5 years. Now that includes 2 components. No one left. They were happy enough to stay with the team. And that includes 2 Manager of the Year candidates and 1 winner of Manager of the Year. So these are good people that chose to stay with me. They had options and they chose to stay on the team. And the second is we had layoffs at MGM. If you remember the 2008 crisis, the financial structure was collapsing, and we had some layoffs. And this was the first time that I learned to not have to, I'm going to use that word, have to, lay someone off. So what happened was, dictate came down from the CFO, lay 10% off. And my boss came in and he said, okay, which 10%? And I looked at him and I said, none. And he said, excuse you? And I said, I'm not laying anybody off. I said, every head you take away from me is millions of dollars that I can't save because I don't have enough people to do the work that's required to restructure and renegotiate. And he said, where is your head? And I said, here's my head is. Give me 1 year and protect all my people. And if the end of the year happens and I haven't met my savings goals, you can fire me. And Jeremy looked at me, he said, you know Corey will fire you, right? This isn't like a game. You're going to get fired. And I said, yeah, I got it. But give me a goal, give me my people, and stay out of my way. And he said, okay. And we pushed back. And we said, we're not firing anybody. We need these people to go produce the savings. I had one person produce $22 million in savings, and they were only making $110,000 a year. They were one of the managers of the year. And they got a nice bonus. Not millions of dollars bonus, but a good person properly motivated can produce 10x the salary, the compensation they're paid. And that's my proudest accomplishment in my years on the doing side.
That is incredible. I don't think I've heard anyone in my career that is so willing to take on a risk like that. Most people would just run the other way and not even think twice about that. I mean, most people would probably have a directive come down from their CFO or executive team and be like, all right, cool, like this is what needs to be done. But I love how you push back and you said, no, I can see a better way of doing things. And that takes a lot of courage.
Kieran, I'll tell you what. Well, it wasn't all courage. Some of it was I was really frustrated with some of the decisions that were being made, and if I got fired, oh well, let's have this out. So part of it was just frustration. Part of it was I loved my team. They were really good people. They deserved a chance. But I was the young manager. I was the climber, the status climber. I was senior vice president at 35 years old. I was that guy. I got to get my title. Got to get my C in my title. And yes, boss, whatever you need done and more. If you ask me for 12% savings, I'm going to go for 20. That's just, I always thought if I over deliver for my boss, then I have a chance at getting the next promotion, if it isn't a promotion, sometimes it's, here's some more responsibility. You did such a good job over there. Now here's some more work to do. So I was that person until I realized I don't have to be. In fact, Harvard was doing a review of layoffs. And I wrote in and I said, hey, listen, I've got something I think your readers would appreciate. And so I interviewed with one of the professors and I told her the story. And she said, oh, so you think Harvard is going to tell all of our readers that they should tell their boss, no, I'm not going to lay anybody off. And I said, it worked for me. And she said, it's not going to make the final cut. And I said, hey, no problem. I'll keep my secret. Don't tell the world. That's fine. But it was that's the proudest thing that I think I have accomplished in my career.
You should be proud. It's something to hold on to, and I'm definitely happy to broadcast that message because I think more people should be hearing about this kind of stuff. So thank you, Mike. Just to round things out, I mean, I have really appreciated this conversation. It's been fascinating. How can our leaders learn more about you, connect with you, and learn about your negotiation training programs?
Yeah, I first of all, personally, I'm on LinkedIn. Link in with me. I post negotiation-related content. We don't do any marketing or anything like that. You're not going to get one of those, oh, I connected with Mike. Hey, I see you connected with me. Can I win your business? I'm going to post negotiation-related content, and it's there because I love it, and hopefully it'll be useful to some of the business people out there. Negotiationtraining.com is our website, and Mike@Tableforce is my email address. However you want to get in touch with me, I try to be agnostic when it comes to modes of communication. My boss loves Apple Blue Bubbles. So I have an app that clones Apple Blue Bubbles. And my daughter's in London and she has WhatsApp and I'm on WhatsApp. I use email. I use whatever tools are out there. I try to be agnostic from a mode perspective so that I can make the other side comfortable in this. I'm going to figure out a way to learn their mode and make them feel comfortable. So Kieran, yeah, any of those ways. Thank you for broadcasting the word.
Love it. Thank you so much, Mike, and all the best. And I'm sure people will be in touch with you very soon.
Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes? If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.